Too late. Hey everybody, welcome. I've been gone for a couple weeks tonight. I'm here with Luke from An Informed State of Mind and Rush Creek Survival. David wanted to be here, but he's got family obligations. He could be on later, depending on how well this goes. But having Luke's good because he's a law enforcement professional. We're going to talk about active shooter and mass shootings. What can you do to prepare for them? What should you be looking for? What type of information out there is terrible, like Run, Hide, Fight, that the FBI still has on their website? We're going to tear that video up because it's the worst advice ever. And it's also not a realistic situation because they're all actors. But it's bad advice. There's some good tips in there, but a lot of it's horrible. So we're going to take a look at that. We'll talk about how to get prepared for it. Luke's got one or more scenarios to look out to decide if you happen to be an armed shooter in a situation based on what he prescribes for you. Would you make that decision? Would you take that shot? That's something we're going to look at. Welcome MCon Black and everybody else out there. So here we got Luke. How are you doing, Luke?
I think I'm doing all right. I think you're hearing me okay?
Yeah, you're fine. You don't have to mute it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, no, we're doing really well. Appreciate you actually asking if I'd be on the show tonight. It's, you said I don't get on very often. Back to being pretty busy in life, I guess. But no, it's definitely a good topic that you're looking at for sure. So I'm hoping I can offer a couple of scenarios and it should be some fun. Learn some stuff too.
That's good. We're going to start off by watching a video on the FBI's website called Run, Hide, Fight. We're going to watch it. We'll just watch it straight through. It's about a 4.5-minute video. We're only watch about 3.5 minutes because the last minute they go over written statements of what to do. We're just going to look at the video portion and what the people say. And then we're going to destroy it for good reason and then tell you exactly what you should do in that situation. And that's how we're going to start.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll need a minute.
No, I'm good. You hear me? Stop.
Now you need to back up. You can't be here anymore. Get out of my face, man. You think I'm afraid of you? Get off, man.
911, there's a clip.
Chances of survival. Don't go up here.
Police, where is he?
By the bar, blue jeans, black shirt. Empty hands up, follow their instructions.
I'm in the direct line of fire if I head for either exit, but I have other options to help me survive. Guys, come on, in here. Come on. Go. Lock and barricade the door.
Both my exits are blocked by the shooter. I gotta stay hidden. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. If you control the weapon, you control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head.
Where is he?
We got him right here.
Please, show me your hands!
Over here.
You can survive a mass shooting. if you're prepared.
Mother of God. Well, that was fun.
Pardon me.
So it's full of contradictions. It wasn't well thought out, and I'm really disappointed the FBI put that out there. I mean, there's good information in there. Like, if you, in that situation or that shooting situation, you exited the building, you had your hands up to show, talk to the police, you know, that's probably smart. I don't think the police are going to stand there and continue pointing their weapons at your chest while everybody else is running around. I don't think the police reaction is probably what was going to happen. But to start with, when the shooting starts, one of the things we see a black female in a blue shirt who they show her looking for exits and identifies an exit. First problem I had is she works there. Based on her outfit, she should already know where multiple exits are. Second, they make it look like I look for an exit, I'm going to run to the exit. But then what they do show is she gets caught up in that crowd. She gets in the mix. It's slowing the movement down. She's fallen over. Somehow she didn't get trampled. And then she chose to exit. And then she made a stupid statement. To me, it was stupid. Running away from the shooter increases your chances of survival. Without proper description and training, that statement is dangerous. Because if you take your time to look up active shooters and where people have been shot, most people follow this program of run, hide, fight to where we run away. When we run away instinctively from the threat, 180 degrees, because we think it's the safest thing to do. The problem is whether you're running direct facing at or away from somebody with a firearm, you are showing the largest part of your body. The other thing is the most vulnerable part of the body is the back, the spine, the back of the head. Nobody wants to get shot, but if you're going to get shot in the head, you want to get shot in the forehead. You have a higher chance of survival getting shot in the forehead than anywhere else. You get shot in the spine, God knows what can happen. The other thing is when they go to the female, the blonde female with the yellow shirt, she says both exits are in the line of fire. It was good for her to say that because she's a patron, but the person who worked there, who chose to make that decision, not only was in the line of fire, she was making it easier to shoot other people. She was slowing them down. There was like 3 or 4 people that tripped trying to help her. So there's that problem. Another problem, some things that were just silly people won't notice, but like when they were in the room, locked up, and this guy's grabbing the guy's arm like this, they say, oh, he's applying direct pressure. The way he's holding an arm was not applying direct pressure. And then they show the woman standing there. If you go back and watch this video, she says, we're applying direct pressure until we can make a tourniquet. Because of the way she phrased it, they intend on trying to or know how to make a tourniquet. But they don't make one. And in that shot, when she says it, she's surrounded by items, including the cord of a lamp where they could have made a tourniquet. Now, maybe they didn't want to show making a tourniquet, but they could have went through the motions as though they were making one. So that was pretty terrible. And then I think they should have called it How to Be a Hero. Because if you look at the guys behind the bar who took him down, I understand running behind the bar because there's so many large objects, but there's no overhead cover and you're trapped. Now, they chose to get out of the way initially of people running out, but they trapped themselves. And odds are 3 guys coming out like that, unless that guy had their back to him and was very close, those last shots probably would have been in one or more of those guys. Oh, yeah. And he points out a tourniquet on an arm that doesn't need it. Based on the injury and how they did the special effects or whatever you call it, the makeup for it, didn't require a tourniquet. So it sends a message if you get shot in the arm, you need a tourniquet. That may not be the case. What else did you see?
Certainly, when I look at the it covers all the points fairly well. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The point you've made a lot of valid points. There's no doubt about that. You're right. I mean, when you're coming out, you certainly want to have your hands up and clear so that this is what we're looking for, right? The police are going to funnel people to a certain degree. If they've got the resources to do that, they should be instructing people before they go in. If the people are going to be certainly coming out, you try to stop an active shooter. 2 officers going in, I guess it depends on where you're at. I say you're probably going to wait until you have 3 to 5, but because we don't necessarily know. Like, I don't know what they were told when they were dispatched to it, or they were just outside. They heard the shots. Somebody came out to an active patrol car that was sitting there and said, "Hey, there's shooting in the bar." These 2 they went in. So I mean, again, it might not be as realistic as we want. The whole point, I guess, is to try to get some information out there. You're right. They probably could have did a better job with it. We're looking at a lot of different things. Situational awareness certainly comes into play here. We're talking about knowing the differences between cover and concealment, for instance. And in that particular case there, a lot of it's going to be concealment. It's not going to be real great cover. Even if it's a handgun, that bar is probably not going to provide great cover. Concealment, yeah, you can conceal yourself behind it, but as you said, it leaves you kind of trapped. And again, we don't necessarily know where the active shooter was, the complete layout. So, yeah, I mean, concealment is something you're going to look for. If you've got one shooter, one known shooter, I see somebody had comment in the outside there talking about, going through the door, not knowing what's on the other side of it. True, but at the same instance, it's it's one of those things where I know where one of them is, and he's actively shooting. So I do want to get out of that range of fire. There's no doubt. If somebody's confident enough, the majority of the population is not going to run at that shooter. It's not going to happen. Even if they think that this is my only chance, most people are gonna sit and cower and plead with the individual. No, not me, right? Maybe someone's gonna be smart enough to try to play dead. If it's one shooter, he probably already knows that you're not dead, right? Maybe. It depends. If you get wounded and you got no other place to go, it might be the way to go. I said it's going to really depend. I think a lot of it, again, is trying to get away from the shooter. If you're going to be running straight away, you're right. It's one of those things you want to sidestep to get away and try to find concealment and then try to plan an exit. Again, it depends on your floor layout, depends on what's around you. So many different things are going to depend on just that, and I guess the surroundings, what the layout is, where the shooter is, how many shooters there is, how active he is. He's got a capability, certainly, with everything, even including a revolver, to put rounds down range pretty quickly, right? So those ones were quite sporadic, pop, pop, pop. But taking the individual, well, if you're trapped and you've put yourself in that situation, it might be better to certainly try than just sit there and take the round. But again, coming front on like that, you might have a better chance. Maybe some distractionary. You know what I mean? If the guy's back was to you, throwing a bottle against the wall on the other side of it, so he turns to that, giving him his back or his side at the very least, giving you a bit more of an advantage on his reaction time. So, and all those people, wow, it must have been Canada. Nobody else had a gun to shoot back.
Well, actually, I think pretty much all states here, because they're serving alcohol, not only serving, but they're in a bar, you can't carry. Even our most conservative states usually have that policy. Not that everybody follows it. I mean, there's cops in known cop bars off duty that carry. We see it in TV shows, but they actually do it. But they're off duty, so they're not really allowed. But yeah, it probably was Canada, because everybody was nice and happy, and the cops showed up so quickly. Yeah, one of the things to point out is that it's not the idea of running or hiding or fighting is necessarily bad. It's how it's taught, and that was terrible, terrible training. And I encourage everybody to go back and watch that video again. I'll put it in the notes after we publish it. And go back and watch it again and critique it. One of the things is, if you look at the blonde female, one of the things she did was get down behind the best she knew to be covered at the time. She at least got below counter height. And then she started looking around. People in combat, and cops do this too, to some degree, depending on the situation, but when you're getting shot at, they don't run away. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but what they do is they seek cover. Cover is things that are probably going to stop a bullet. Probably. Depends on the bullets being shot at you. There's things like ricochets. they're probably going to stop a bullet. Concealment are things that hide you. Preferably, you want cover. Cover and concealment aren't always the same. You know, bulletproof glass is cover, definitely not concealment. A wall made out of toilet paper is concealment, definitely not cover. But you want to seek cover, and you want to assess the situation. What that did for her in that situation was she was hugged up against the wall by the stools below the counter. Other people were rushing by. She was not getting trampled. She was not slowing them down and not panicking too much. And she was able to look around and see what was going on. Because of that, she found another way. That was probably the only good part of the video about how anybody reacted, in my opinion. The other thing is, depending on the situation, if you can tell where the bullets are coming from, when you run away, you don't run directly away from them and show them your back. You need to run profile, left or right of them. Reason why is, it's a smaller target, you're moving. Even experienced shooters have a hard time moving left and right, especially on a running target, and hitting them, knowing how to lead them properly. Even most people in the military can't do that well. There's very few people have that kind of training, and so far we've been lucky because all the shooters have had no training, no real training. So it's going to drastically improve your chances of survival if you have to run. But you do it like that girl did, where if the option's available, you can take some sort of cover, even if you had to move a short distance to it, assess the situation, and continue to run profile to whatever that person's doing. Whether somebody's running at you or away from you, their physical size, unless they're close, doesn't change much. It's easier to shoot them. And it's easier for a person like this to shoot somebody in the back than in the face. Just the humanity of the situation looking at them. That's one thing I want to point out. The other thing is, I've talked about this for like situational awareness all the time and stuff I used to do working, but any place you go, you should know where exits are. You should be looking for the exits. I've talked many times about going into a restaurant, immediately excusing yourself to a restroom just so you can walk through the facility and identify other doors and ways out, just for safety's sake, if you needed it. And I always use example of things like, what if a fire breaks out? You know, what if this happens? What if there's a riot in the street and people run in and you want to get out of there, but also an active shooter? It's ridiculous. Of all the dumb stuff they did some really stupid stuff, like having the employee had to find out where the exit was, and she looks at the exit. She works there. She knows where that is. But you want to know where exits and alternative exits. Exits that aren't marked as exits, but can be used as ways to get out of a building, such as back doors, storage rooms, loading docks, windows that open, windows that can be broken. Other things to look for. What will stop bullets? Let's say you don't know what will stop bullets. There's a lot of people out there who have no idea what bullets can do. Well, when you go into a place like that, if you're sitting at a table, is that a table that you could flip on its side and hide behind? And is it heavy? Because while it's not always the case, if it's very light and easy to move, it may not be something that's going to stop bullets. If it's very heavy, it probably is made of materials that more than likely have a better chance of stopping handgun rounds. And I say handgun rounds for a specific reason. The vast majority of shootings are handguns. They're not rifles. Do they happen with rifles? Sure they do. But we're not talking politics, which is part of idiocy of the political response as they go after rifles when those are not the weapons used. But it's worth learning. Even if you don't like guns, it's worth learning what bullets will do and what will stop bullets that you can get behind. You know, other things you can look at are the fighting situation. That should be a last resort. It should be escaping. But some people choose to fight. And Luke, if you can you give us one or more scenarios we can talk about, situations to let these guys say, okay, here's the situation. What would I do before we tell you how it plays out? Possible ways it could play out. There's no guaranteed way, but possible ways it could play out.
Well, there's one that I always give because of the fact that I think it's a pretty decent one. And it's more, I guess this is kind of a more probable one if you were ever get into an active shooter. We take away the school situation, right? But we could even look at it from two different angles. So one, I think that the one I like to go to certainly is a mall. And let's just say that you were in we got the food court. Always comes in people's mind when you think about a mall or a mall shooting or a mass shooter in a mall or an active shooter in a mall, something like this. To me, it's you guys. So you get a person who you're in one of the shops that is alongside of in one of the major corridors in a mall, and all of a sudden you're hearing a distinctive sound of pop, pop, pop. And and you recognize that it's a handgun, and you're saying, hey, this is a shooter, and also you're seeing people running down down the aisleway or the main corridor. So it's similar to the video that you just showed as well. So you can look at it as, well, what would you do as that patron? Would you go out of the store and run because you don't know, or is, hey, this sounds like this guy is getting closer to our location, or people are saying, hey, he's coming this way, run. So do you actually shelter in place? Do you look for a rear exit out of that facility to a service corridor or a door that goes right into a back alley? Or do you actually fall in line with everyone else and go up into the main corridor because that's what you're familiar with? So you're going to go out that way. Now, the second aspect of that, of course, is looking at it from the standpoint where you're actually a person who carries, and you're not in a gun-free zone, as that we talk about, and you certainly have the ability to carry, and you are carrying. So do you go out and investigate that because you have the ability to stop that shooter? And there's going to be some things to consider with that. And we'll get into that maybe a little bit after we give a chance for maybe somebody to put what they would do. So the two different scenarios is that you don't have a firearm, you're in one of these stores, or you're out in the hallway. Do you try to make it to the nearest exit, or do you shelter in place because you're just not sure? Do you go into one of those little stores? Then the other scenario, of course, being is that you are in active carrying civilian, and you have a firearm. Do you shelter in place? Do you wait for an opportunity from that place, or do you go out and actually try to be the hero? And then I'm not saying that in a condescending way. It's, are you actually going to go out and try to stop that threat? And is there anything to consider with that? So those are the two different ways I would put the mall shooting situation. And there's another one too, but if we looked at that one, so what would you do? I mean, if you were an unarmed civilian and you were in the main corridor, or you were outside of the corridor, what would you do? Would you try to get to that corridor? Would you try to help other people, usher other people? You could even put yourself with a family member, maybe the whole family, and you can do that with both scenarios, armed and unarmed, right? It's a good scenario to look at, right? And again,
Yeah.
the environment certainly comes into play, and floor plan and so on and so forth. Because you might be in a store that sells just, shoes. So there's shoes from JCPenney or something like that, and we're all the way to the top, you know what I mean, with shoes. That's a better avenue certainly to hide and, play cat and mouse with somebody who's shooting. Whereas if you go into another store where you can actually see completely all around in it, and it's sparse, there you go. But
Well, they're good examples because one of the things is about how you speak. One of the things you keep saying is stopping the threat. The reason you say that is you're a cop. You've been a cop for a long time. That's how cops think. Most civilians don't think that way. Military doesn't even think that way. Most military's never been in a gunfight, not a real one, and they have no idea how to react to the situation. Very few of them do. And most of them that say stuff are like most hothead civilians. They talk about, I would go get that guy. That's what I would do. And it's like, okay, how would you do it? They don't know how to explain it. Or it's like, why? Why would you do it? They don't talk about stopping the threat. They talk about the people that need their help. They have the hero complex. They think they're doing a good thing. They know hero complex is bad, so they get defensive. But that's the thing. They're thinking about being a hero. They're not thinking about saving lives. They're thinking about recognition. In both those situations, I mean, for me personally, the store dictates what I do in the store. But if I thought shots were getting closer, unless I knew for sure where an exit was in the main corridor I could get to, based on how many people I could see, I'd probably stay in that store because most of them at least have a back area, which is what I would recommend most people do. Now, you have, I'll take this a little further on something Luke has mentioned before. You have a firearm. Let's say you choose to get involved for whatever reason, and you go out there. So you get out in that main corridor with your firearm. Maybe it's drawn, maybe it's not. Well, let's start with that. First reaction. If people are still running through there and you have no idea where police are, and you come out and you have a drawn firearm, what do you think they're going to think? They might think you're another shooter or the shooter, and therefore you might get attacked. And then what are you going to do? Because they're coming after you because you got a gun, you're going to start shooting them? You'd have to play that one out in court. You went out there to help people, now you ended up hurting them. So that's the first thing you got to think about. let's say it's not drawn or it's drawn and there aren't people there. You find cover. A lot of malls, especially in this country, have big things made of concrete with flowers or benches, something large that you know is cover. And you get behind this piece of cover. And you identify a person with a gun moving towards you. And they're moving towards you just like the sounds of the gunshots were. They don't see you, but you see them. You feel you're proficient with your firearm. Let's say there's no other civilians in the area. Let's say you understand backstop and you realize, based on the wall that's behind them at whatever distance, the odds of any collateral damage other than a window are extremely low. And you take that shot and you shoot that guy. Now you're a hero. Let's look at the first possibility. Whether it's you or police later, you go up and check that guy, guess what? He's an off-duty cop. Or he's another civilian with a gun and he's not the shooter, and then the shooter got away. Or you shoot that guy and then you get shot because he's not the shooter. So you never identified he was a shooter. You just saw a guy with a gun. That's part of the problem, is people don't think about what they would actually do in these situations. Or let's say you stand up to shoot that guy or go to shoot that guy. You miss, which is the most likely situation for almost everybody. He returns fire and takes you out or wounds you. Maybe he's the shooter. Maybe he's a cop. Maybe he's another guy like you, but he knows what he's doing. There's all kinds of scenarios people don't think about. They just think, oh, I'd just shoot the guy. Really? Would you? Here's the other thing, too. Most people say they would do it, but most people won't. I don't know the percentage, but I would bet it's 98, 99% of the United States that carries a firearm, including infrequently, not even frequently, has never pulled a gun on somebody. And even if they have, far less of them have ever shot anybody. They don't understand the complexities of that and what it means, what it's going to feel like. There's also almost nobody out there that can do it like somebody in the movies and be good and never miss and not worry about it. So your situational awareness, I think, is the most important thing. This is part of the reason why it's getting away is the best plan. Trying to save people, more than likely, you're going to get people hurt and or go to jail for doing something stupid because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you think about. So if you follow the run, hide, fight philosophy, what they did is they got locked in a room preparing for the possibility. If they come through that door, we're going to have to fight. We're blocked in. True, in that situation, probably would. Although the guys behind the bar didn't think we're very smart in what they did. They had a plan and decided they were going to attack this guy. Probably should have waited until they didn't have a choice, but they had to fight. That's the situation when you'd use a firearm. When you know for sure you have to fight. But if you have to choose to do it, if you're not a cop or you're not trained in that stuff, which almost nobody is, you probably shouldn't. You're going to get people hurt, if not go to jail.
I mean, defending yourself certainly in a situation, where you're, well, it's a one-on-one, right? We call it the 1+1 rule. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's it. It's life or death. That's it. Even if you think you can actually get away, to cover, right, or concealment and then cover, to create distance. And again, not running away from the threat directly, as you've said, especially with an edged weapon or anything of that nature too, never turn your back on that. Especially with an edged weapon, I would say 25 feet. Be very mindful. Anything underneath of 25 feet. Yeah, I mean, I think that I personally, if I was in the store, I would probably just shelter in place. I would tell other people that are around me to stay down, stay low. You know what I mean? And if the threat came to me, then I absolutely going to have to deal with it. But even as an off-duty officer, even if I had a lot of range time, and not just range time, but a lot more practice in the area of active shooting. So identifying the threat and being able to place rounds efficiently and effectively in a stressful scenario, and actually practicing that. And you're right, there's not a lot of people that are going to have that. And so to be fair, some other people, we could say, okay, yeah, if you see a guy out there with an AK and he's pop, or anything to that nature, rifle, that's a lot better chance that it's not a civilian actually, is trying to get the active shooter.
Sure.
So you're gonna be able to identify that and use your noodle and say, okay, yeah, there's a pretty good chance here that I'm gonna be correct. Even if you weren't correct, Down the road, you still might be exonerated because I mean, there is with such thing as, well, in Canada, anybody's good faith. We're certainly not. Nobody's going to be armed in there. Not even an off-duty police officer in Canada. But it's everything you stated is exactly right. You know, the odds might be stacked against you. And that's the one I was thinking about. It's like, boy, especially in the mall in, say, Dallas or something like that, or Texas. Maybe I'm off kilter. I don't know which city or town would carry the most, or have the most people carrying. But maybe in Georgia, for instance. I don't know. What if it's a parking lot? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of people carry their guns in vehicles. I don't know.
But you're not, I suppose outdoors from a car you could see it, but even then I'd still think they're a bad guy. You don't really see people open carrying shotguns and rifles. The ones that do it are idiots who don't know what they're doing, trying to get attention for themselves, making a video for YouTube hits, talking about their rights, trying to cause problems, trying to cause a scene. People don't really do that. So yeah, in that situation, and there was a shooter, and then you saw that, my first thought would be, yeah, if it's a rifle, that's the bad guy. But one of the things is you always have, most of the time anyway, not always, most of them are handguns. It's something to think about. The other thing to think about, too, is what happens when his weapon jams and he can no longer fire and doesn't have a weapon, and he just runs at you. Are you going to shoot him? Some people would say yes. My question would be, can you? Not are you capable, but can you legally do it? Because that might put you in jail. Or what happens if your weapon's jams and you can't clear it? You know, or what happens if both your weapons jam or you're both running out of ammo because you both suck at what you're doing, which is very likely. And then you have to fight in alternative methods. Do you know how to do that? Because one of the bad things about that FBI video is while there was only 2 cops, they were magically fast. They just happened to be in the area. That's not going to be the situation. I was in Tacoma, Washington 15 years ago or so when they had a shooting in that mall. I would have been in the mall if I wouldn't have forgot my wallet at home. And it took a while for those cops to show up. And that's in Tacoma. It's not a huge town, but there's a lot of cops there for the size of the town, at least at the time. There's a lot of gang activity, and they are very, very quick to show up at places, and they were not there that quickly. So that's something else to think about. How long would you be there? Yeah, and like I put up this one earlier from Chris B., I'd be inclined to hide and wait for an opportunity, which suggests he's in a situation where he probably can't get away, so he's waiting for that opportunity. But I realize a lot of training and practice is needed. Otherwise, my chances of successfully playing hero are not likely to land well. That's the truth for almost everybody. Cops train for this. It doesn't always end well for them. The military trains for it. They go out and do direct action missions where they don't have to worry about a lot of stuff cops do. They don't do too well all the time. Only because they have overwhelming numbers. You know, and you get stuff like this. People say this, the best way to fight crime is to shoot back. It's like the worst thing you can tell anybody. Number one, the legal situation may not allow for it. You might end up killing somebody, going to jail without killing them. You know, fight crime. There's all kinds of crime that don't involve violence. Shooting at them isn't the answer. I'm not saying you shouldn't do something about it. I'm not going to tell anybody how to protect their house or their business. But what I am saying is, if a 12-year-old kid comes in, grabs a Snickers, and runs out the door, that's shoplifting. That's a crime. So are you telling me you're going to fight that crime by shooting that kid in the back as he runs out the door? Sorry, you're doing life without parole. People don't think about what they say. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with Luke so we could talk about, like, let's look at the steps involved. Why do we do these things? You know, take the Vegas thing. That was an anomaly. Not only for the type of weapons, the distance the shooter was at. Nobody there was going to get the shooter out as far as people getting shot at. There's probably thousands of people in a crowded concert at night. Chaos. But the only thing they can hope for is cover or being fast enough. The distance they were shooting and at night probably didn't matter how they ran. They had that advantage. But the guys shooting fully automatic weapons. Hard to say where those bullets are going to go. Some people were able to see cover. Some couldn't because they ran out of cover. That's an anomaly. But I can tell you what, I've been shot at distance by fully automatic weapons. We seek cover or get down flat as we can and make a small profile wherever we can and crawl places. That's your best chance of survival. Running is number 2 when it's allowed for it. What are some other tips, being a cop, you think would help people out as far as a shooting hasn't happened, but a shooting, an emergency, riot, disaster, anything could happen? What are things people should prepare for every time they go somewhere, or anytime they're traveling somewhere, things they should look at or pay attention to, just as things they should be aware of in case something bad does happen?
Well, personally, I mean, Rush Creek Survival, so it's in the title. You know, I believe in certainly being as prepared as you can be. You know, so if you go out there, doing a bit of research as to where you're going. So if you're going someplace brand new, right? Doing is as much pre-work on that as you can. When you do go in, right, in the moment, you're certainly trying to gather intel, if you would. If you start living your life that way, as some people will say, well, geez, I don't want to live in fear my whole life. It's not really living in fear. It's just basically, you know, you're situationally aware. You know, so whether that's the pre-work up, you know what I mean, to where you're going, to say, hey, this is where we're going to be going, or before you even get into the motel room, you know, you're checking out, you know, how many how many steps it is, you know, certainly, you know, out to a particular exit, or how do you get out? You know, is left the right way? If the right, you know, if right's no good, is left going to work? You know, where does that take you? Having a little pre-walk, you know. So if you're going, having something in as far as a go bag, you know, having a little bit of resources in a bag, you know, having that in your vehicle, getting used to doing that. It's a little harder if you're going to a beach per se, and it's a crowded beach. But then again, you know, maybe don't put yourself right in the middle, you know, or closest to the water. Put yourself at the back so you have a quick egress if something were to take place. You know, there's a lot of different scenarios. I think a lot of it really comes down to trying to train yourself to be a critical thinker, right? So that when something does happen, you've kind of. I did a show once, and I remember this way back when, and I had someone in the audience on the side, and he says, you know, I don't subscribe to fantasy in the sense, or I don't subscribe to what ifs. And I thought it was such a stupid comment, because we do, and he does subscribe to what ifs. You know, I simply asked him, I said, do you carry a spare tire? You know what I mean? Yeah, well, it came with the car. I said, would you if you didn't have one? You know what I mean? Would you put one in it? You know, do you wear a seatbelt? If it wasn't the law, would you wear it anyways? You know, so it's, yeah, you do subscribe to the what ifs. We all do. You know, we look before we leap. We look both ways. Well, I mean, that's talking about the what ifs. That's scene size up. That's being situationally aware. So we all do it. We can just expand on that a little bit more. And the more little different scenarios that you can kind of fantasize, and I guess we'll use that word, but fantasize about, not for the glory or whatever the case may be in an actual shooting scenario, but if you think that you're really going to be a hero in that situation, well, then maybe you should actually really train like a hero would, you know, and so that you would be better prepared in that scenario and actually know what to do. Because in the mall scenario, for instance, one of the best options you could probably do is sit tight and try to be a good witness, right? How many shots were there? You know, where are the shots coming from? Did it sound like it was going further away? So when you see a police officer, you can actually maybe provide that information, you know, and then maybe leave out behind the police at that particular point. It's hard to say. Being a good witness in a lot of cases is one of the best ways of doing that. But again, that's being able to be situationally aware and knowing some of the information ahead of time. I think that a lot of people get tunnel vision, and they're going to get tunnel vision. There's probably a lot they're going to do about that. They're never going to prepare, right, to that extent. Like we're talking about, it's not probable, right? I could take a room full of 100 people, random people off the street, and put them into a room and ask these questions and give them different scenarios, and they're probably all going to fail miserably. You know, or basically ask everybody to shut the lights out and just say, you know, go and start going through the people and saying, when you first walked in the room, what did you see? That's interesting. It's an interesting exercise, you know. Yeah, it really is. I think it's talking about, you know, I always go back to that Doomsday Prepper show that was on, certainly it was Nat Geo, I think they may put it out of History Channel. And there was all the different people that were preparing for different things. You know, I'm preparing for a nuclear catastrophe. I'm preparing for a volcano, or I'm preparing for a tornado, or I'm preparing for whatever the case is, an economic collapse. I think that, and I guess this is why I really enjoy doing the shows over the years. Whether it was way back to GB Survival, or certainly even all the Rush Creek Survival. Now I just don't have the time to kind of put into it. But it was a good time for me to talk about what it was. It was not so much even teaching it. It was a matter of bringing it to the forefront of my brain consistently and talking about these things, whether you prepared at home, or whether it was 72-hour prep, or whether it was 2-week prep, or 6-month prep, or making your lifestyle a little bit better, doing it every day. So what would I advise people? Well, I advise to do your homework, to train, to have equipment that you're familiar with, that you can use. It's like when I say to people, when you put a 72-hour kit together, or a bug-out bag, or whatever the case is, it's not enough to go out and get all the stuff and put it into the bag. You have to go out and actually use this stuff so that you know that you can use it. Do it in the best possible conditions, right? Train in the best possible conditions, and then progressively make it worse and worse and worse, to the point where you're training in the worst possible conditions. This way, if something were to ever take place, you're going to be prepared. So instead of actually going out and waiting for yourself to get a flat tire on the side of the road, go out and change a flat tire, or go change a tire on your vehicle in the driveway that's flat. And then next time you go to a gravel parking lot and you do it there, and then you do it on a bit of an incline, and understanding you need to block the wheels and so on and so forth. Because this way, when you're on a freaking shitty back road and it's raining and you got to change your tire, you're actually going to have some kind of clue, and it's not going to be as bad. This day and age, I guess it's easier to pick up your phone and call CAA or whatever the case is, or AAA or whatever you guys call it there. And we always say we'll carry a kit in your vehicle. Well, how often is people going to be in a location where they're actually going to utilize that kit? There could be different locations, I suppose, where that's applicable. Those are the people we're speaking to. Where I live, for instance, you have an hour between gas stations or between places. And other than that, it's wilderness, for an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on time and night you're at. Having a first aid kit, maybe a trauma kit, or close as you can get to it, but understanding how to use it. Well, a lot of it is just that. Yeah, and training is critical. Yeah, absolutely, it builds confidence. That's exactly right. Now, I mean, a lot of these people that have been watching this show tonight, maybe they have that. Maybe they're police officers, former police officers, military, who knows? Maybe there's a medic out here, or a firefighter, or somebody who just understands that concept and actually prepares. So, well, that's it. And in the other scenarios, where I tell people, don't feel bad if you can't be a hero. Be a good witness, or be a great witness, be a reliable witness. So that if at the end of the day you're the hero because you were able to give crucial information when it came time to the trial, for instance, to put the bad guy away officially, instead of something being botched and nobody had really any clue and nobody was reliable, and they got off on a technicality, and that's crime in itself, isn't it? So,
oh yeah.
And again, police officers, whether it's medics or whatever the case is, we're trained to gather information reliably. Because it can become part of a report, and that report's can become part of a brief, and then that brief is going to become part of a Crown's defense or a Crown's prosecution. I guess it's not a Crown where you guys are. We're British, so. Yeah. So and that's just it. I would say don't have to be a hero. You can be a hero just being a good witness. Be reliable. Don't tell me the car was black. You're my only witness. Meanwhile, the car was white. Fuck. That's terrible. You're going, well, we know it wasn't, and this is your statement. You built in the statement. And everything else you're saying is great, but you got the vehicle wrong. That doesn't look good. And I've seen that happen before. You're just like, oh man, this guy's got all the details, just great. And it's like, yeah, so did you guys, know that he was in the black vehicle? And you're like, the guy wasn't. He was in a white vehicle. We've got 3 other people stating he was in a white vehicle, but nobody else really has anything else. But you've got the good stuff, but yeah, you got the color of the vehicle wrong. And that's unfortunate. And maybe in that situation, some of that can be just left out. We won't ask that witness that question, and hopefully defense doesn't. But it's I don't know. There's just not one thing that as an officer, or even as a person who's certainly keen on survival in general, or being prepared, or being situationally aware. You know, a lot of people don't understand that stuff. Hell, I look at it from even people that get into a zone of coming from, 60 miles an hour going into a 35 miles an hour zone, and they don't see the signs whatsoever. And you're going, how did you not see that? Or you get them speeding through a construction zone, and you're like, there was literally 7 signs all together that brought to the point where the last one was maximum fine is $1,500 for speeding through an active construction zone. The first one was construction ahead, construction zone, and then it's speed reduced. Then there's the actual speed limit, and then there's the next sign, flagman sign, and they missed all of that, and still we're doing 110. Or sorry, correction. I guess they're looking at this with 60. They're doing 60 kilometers or 60 miles an hour. And you're like, how did you miss all of that? Those people, I just go, you shouldn't even be driving. I don't even know if you should leave the house, quite frankly. You're the one that's going to get hit by a bus, and they're out there. I suppose everybody needs a job, so it's good to keep hospital workers and funeral home directors in business. But
Well, one thing I didn't bring up, I talk about a lot, is on here and on the podcast, I always talk about reading body language, detecting deception, signs of stress, relating to working with people for different reasons. And it's important for people to understand those, because we look at this comment. He says, attention to detail is an uncommon skill. I mention that because if we go back here to Chris B's comment where he talks about Florida, he's like, you go to the supermarket, there's probably 2 to 3 people in there that he knows is carrying that most people don't see. Let's step that up a bit. Almost every state allows for the carrying of a firearm with a permit. There's 2 or 3 that are very difficult to get. But you get in some of the bigger states, they usually have that. Then you have constitutional carry, as they call it, which is states that allow you to carry concealed without a permit. So more people are going to be doing it. You can get states like Washington that are liberal blue states that have concealed weapons permits that are not hard to get, but also have open carry. The point is, whether or not you're carrying a gun, there are people around you that are carrying firearms. You should assume that, the higher the population. The reason I say that is earlier in the mall thing, I talked about we decided to go out, we got undercover, we identified a shooter, but they weren't a shooter. We identified somebody with a gun, we chose to shoot them, and we shot this cop. Think about this. You're in a place like a supermarket, using his example,
well, hopefully,
and there is a shooter.
hopefully.
You may very well see other people pull out firearms. Here's the thing to understand. None of them are functioning at 100% capacity. At a minimum, they got adrenaline they can't control. They're not totally focused on this. Now let's add in the fact it's very unlikely they have the training anyway. This is assuming you even do. You have to recognize the fact you could be reacting the same way as well, and you don't know what people are going to do. I mentioned one guy before. Now we got who knows how many inside of a store out in a parking lot. What training do they have? How much adrenaline's going through their body? How scared are they? How much are they freaking out? They see everybody else with a gun. Are they going to think they're all active shooters? Do they really know who the shooter is? You got to think about that too. How many good guys with a gun are out there? They always say, best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. No. The best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a trained guy with a gun, not a good guy. Good guys are everywhere. They're not trained. They're not confident. They got adrenaline flowing through the body. I don't care who you are, what you think you've done or really have done. When's the last time you had a gun in your face? When's the last time you were in a lethal situation? This is why it's different for cops. They do domestics or pull people over on the highway doing regular patrol stops. Those are 2 of the most dangerous things they can ever do. They're thinking about their life every day. Everyday person usually isn't, so you got to think about that too. How many other people have a firearm? How many people have a firearm you don't see, and when you choose to get involved, you're the guy walking down the corridor looking for him, and then somebody else pops you because they want to be a good guy with a gun, but they're not trained, and they think you're the shooter. That's something you got to think about. This is why this is important. This is why I say, look, get away. But we're talking about adults, but let's look at kids. How many shootings have happened in schools? It's happening all the time. They're not carrying guns. Shouldn't be. Anyway. They don't need to entertain these subjects. They need to think about how well do they know their school, depending on how big it is or how many people are there. Do they know where the exits are? Do they know alternative exits? Do they know if they're in the lunchroom how to get into or over the counters into the lunchroom to get away? You know, if you have little kids and they're carrying backpacks, have you put extra items or bought body armor made for backpacks to be put in there? So when the little kids run away, if they get shot in the backpack, they have a higher probability. Because the younger they are, no matter how much you teach them, generally, not for all of them, but generally, they're going to react more instinctively until they're older and able to make those decisions. You know, a 5-year-old getting shot at in kindergarten is going to have more of an instinctive reaction versus somebody that's 15. You know, and how hot-headed are kids, especially teenage boys? I'm on the football team. I want to be All-American. I lift weights. I'll take this other kid out because I think he's a nerd. Maybe they do, and they do become the hero. But the idea is to get away, to save your life and those around you. So you can teach kids whatever you want. I'm just saying there's other aspects to look at. What are you telling your kids? What do you think about when you go places? We teach people to look both ways across the street. We don't teach them to look for any exits when we go into a building. Kids have fire drills all the time in schools for good reason, not just because they're required. When's the last time you told your kid what to do in the grocery store or in the church if there's a fire? Ever have those conversations? If you don't have kids, do you have those conversations with yourself or your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend? You know, what do you think about? I just wanted to mention those because I think people get caught too much in the bravado of good guy with a gun. No, good guys with a gun get people killed. Train guys with a gun. That's what's important. Like, I'll go back here to another comment right here. NC, this is coming from another cop. This is what a cop thinks. Those of us who have had extensive, not just regular, extensive active shooter training know there's never a guarantee of safety for the officer or the innocent civilians. But inaction is a guarantee of a high risk. That is true. The problem is too many good guys think the same thing, but they don't have that training. Like, I can give you all kinds of reasons why you should never clear leather, meaning unholster your firearm. But I will tell you this. I don't care how often you carry a firearm. Let's say you're carrying a firearm and you find yourself in this situation. If you have not removed your firearm from that holster in the last 24 hours, and I'm being gracious, I should say 12. If you haven't removed that firearm for any reason within 24 hours, you have no reason doing it now. Because that means you have no training. It means you're a person who leaves a gun in a holster, takes it on and off when it suits you. God knows when the last time you pulled it out and cleaned it was, or you cleared it, or how you stored it. You just left it in the holster. You don't use it. I mean, have you looked at guns, even ones that have set in places like a closet, not a safe, for just a few days, a few weeks, what the barrels look like? You know, if you just take your holster on and off and you never pull that weapon out and you don't clean it, you don't shoot it, you don't unload it, you don't check it to see if it's safe, you don't do that as part of a regular habit, you're not a disciplined owner of a firearm and you got no business. I don't even know why you carry it. That is just my opinion, but it's people like that get people shot. There's been all kinds of guys in this country that have tried to be a good guy with a gun and got killed. I remember we were doing it back when we used to do stuff with Luke and David all the time and those other guys. There was a situation we looked at, and this guy was in a convenience store with his kid and he got killed because he didn't know what he was doing because he was a good guy with a gun, but he wasn't trained. So they're just things to think about. It's nice to want to do the right thing, and unfortunately movies make us think it's always going to work out. It's more than likely not going to work out, and that's what I think people need to be aware of. Safety first, like right here. Safety, risk, safety. I don't know. Am I crazy, or do you think am I saying anything that makes sense here?
No, you're right on. If you want to be training and practice makes proficiency. I mean, and that's just it. And the more you do that, the more proficient you are at anything, right? You know, they talk about, muscle memory and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of truth to that. Most people don't have a lot of time, right? Even police officers, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, they're and again, it depends on the department. Maybe it even depends on the country, right? Or the region, whatever the case is. Whether sheriff, troopers down there, or if it's you're a city kitty or whatever the case is, right? Municipal, or city police. Again, how often do you actually have to qualify, or how often do you actually are required to go to the range, right? How much range time do you actually have to log? How much do you go out and do it on your own? And how far do you go? So you can say, certainly talking about training for active shooter scenarios, well, how often do they actually train that in that particular department? So you've got officers that may be trained, maybe not very well trained. They probably have the process down fairly well. And they probably got more training and discipline than the average person. They carry it every day. Then again, depending on where it is, if you're in Detroit, Michigan, or whether in LA, bad sections of town, you might have that firearm out twice a shift, maybe more, who knows. Um, so, like I say, it just depends. Here, for instance, man, I'd be scared. Even as an officer off duty, I would be, honestly. I'd be like, I don't know how this is going to work out. They'll probably have it figured out.
Oh, Luke dropped out there. Unfortunately, he must have lost his connection. So we got Tolgan here. If I say that, Tolgalen. This is why I think you need more background checks to carry. I'm on the viewpoint that everyone should go through at least basic training on how to react and handle situations carry. Yeah, I agree with the statement that thoughts like that violate the Second Amendment, but I do agree with you. I think you have a certain responsibility. Like, I was waiting for Luke to finish. I was going to mention on training, I've known plenty of people that talk about how they shoot better than their cop friend or military friends. And I always ask them why, and they say, well, we're at the range. We had some circle targets up 15 feet or whatever, 7 yards, and I shot better than them. And my first thought is, you have no business carrying a firearm if that's what you think. Because that's all they've done, and they have no idea what training is. Like cops and military, I mean, there's times that they go for scores, but they're trying to hit targets to make them stop. Or in a military sense, probably more than make them stop. But their training is different on how to shoot and why. That's why people who go from shooting just targets and then they take a couple classes and they go, well, I'm going to do 2 in a body and 1 head, and then that's all they do. That's all they know how to do. And then when they get in a shooting situation, they're going to shoot somebody 3 times and go to jail for murder. So make sure you know what good training is. Make sure you understand situations. Stuff Luke said earlier, when's the last time have you ever changed a tire? Have you tried just doing it in your driveway? Have you tried doing it in gravel? Like, I taught a kid a few years ago how to change a tire. So I was out here in Arizona. I made sure we were on flat ground, but I waited till we had monsoons and there was a tons of rain. I took him out and made him change the tire in the rain. And it sucked. But it was good for him. And I helped him, walked him through it, but made him do most of the work. But yeah, this is the most important thing. You should know what responsibility is. This is why, going back to the whole situation, it comes down to, there's another one we saw too that was really good right here from Chris B. I think of it like airlines, put your oxygen mask on before you try to help others. It's focused on active shooters. We talked about a lot of things, but the thing is, most likely, most people, most of the time, are going to make the wrong decision. They're not trained and prepared for it. They don't know what they're getting into. They're going to make good faith decisions. And even if they're cleared in court, they're going to do things and hurt people that they have to live with the rest of their life, which is nothing compared to what their families are going to have to live with. Escaping, getting out of the situation, especially in violence like this, best thing. You'll notice all the times we talked about on here on the Grayman podcast, people talked about getting in and out of riot situations, right? A lot of those riot situations, they had weapons, throwing cocktails, and had violence. In none of those situations did we talk about engaging the crowd lethally. So I don't know why that would be a go-to situation because somebody's shooting. They're far more dangerous than a crowd of people that are just pissed and maybe thrown in breaking into a store, stealing clothes. They're far more dangerous and probably not in the right mind, probably not capable of making good decisions. So make sure you're making good decisions. Make sure you're teaching people how to make good decisions. Go back and if you're really interested in this, especially if you're new, go back and in the links, you'll see my podcast, Grayman Hiding Plain Sight. Go look on the ones on situational awareness and listen to those, and things that I do or I look for when I go in places had nothing to do with an active shooter that can help you. Knowing that when I go in a store, I make sure I know where exits are. I make sure I know which doors are working. I make sure I identify other doors or stuff in the building that I can get into. I always, especially in a new grocery store, how a lot of grocery stores, they have 2 exits and they have an aisle between the 2 before the checkout counters, before the food. I will walk those aisles from one door to the other before I go shopping, looking at all the other doors on the inside that are between those 2 exit doors and watching anybody going in and out of them to see how they do it, to see if it has any type of security access or if they need a key to get in there, so I know not to check that door. I do that all the time. Not because I'm scared of anything. It's part of my training. But I look for that stuff. What are the other exits? What are the ways to get out? If I'm in a restaurant or any other place, what objects do I think can stop bullets if I had to do that? Or could protect me from falling to grief or any other situation where things might fall? Anything can happen. It sucks when they do, but the Best thing you can do, no matter what your opinion is on any of this subject, is to train to the best of your ability, learn your skills better, put the time and effort in to make sure that in the unfortunate, unlikely event something does happen, you know how to react, you're prepared for it, you've put the practice in, and not only that, when you have the training and the practice, it actually frees up more of your active conscious mind to make decisions and pay attention to what's going on around you. Remember, I've said this before, the best trained, there's only a few hundred of them, the best trained, most skilled soldiers in the world, studies have shown, can only track about 30% what's going on in a gunfight and a battle. 30%. That means you as the average person, significantly less, single digits. Imagine how much more you could pay attention to if you had the training to where you didn't have to think about how does this tourniquet work, or where is an exit, or what do I do in this situation, or which guy should I pay attention to, where you don't have to think through the steps because you put the time and practice in. What other stuff could you pay attention to? But anyway, that's the show for tonight. That's our hour. I thank everybody for coming. Enjoyed all your comments. For those watching after or watching now, like and subscribe if you like the content. We're going to be here every Sunday, unless I'm sick like I was the last 2 weeks, at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, with Luke and or David on the Three Wise Men, or we'll be doing the show Grayman versus whichever topic, which I have some more coming up. So thanks for being here, and we will see you next time.